Korean division. So today's scholars discussion series of Korea Research Circle brings to you the topic of evaluating the evolution of cybersecurity governance framework in South Korea. Today's speaker is Meghna Pradhan. She is a PhD scholar in the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi. Meghna has completed her bachelor's in economics from Symbiosis School of Economics, Pune, master's in East Asian Studies from University of Delhi, and MPhil in Korean Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University. She has also worked as a consultant for Cooper Research Private Limited, a boutique market research firm specializing in qualitative analysis. Her area of interest include non-traditional security, technological artifacts, and their influence on politics and culture. Before we begin the session, there are some housekeeping rules. As for Meghna, the time period for presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes. And the last 15 to 20 minutes we will be dedicating for question answer session. As for question answering session, you can raise your hand or comment on the chat box or directly ask during the question answer session. I heartily welcome you, Meghna, for the presentation. You may begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Arya, for that introduction. Alright, just let me get this up now. Um, I hope this is visible to everyone. Yeah.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So, as was mentioned, my topic for today is evaluating the evolution of cybersecurity governance and governance framework in South Korea. So before I begin with just describing the South Korean cyberspace framework, governance framework, I just want to make sure that this is as exciting as cyberspace is. The topic of governance does tend to run dry. So instead of focusing on what organizations are there and what policies and laws are there, I would like to focus on what was the basically environment in which those were created. So to begin with, so South Korean stake in cyberspace, we need to understand where why is this important? Why is governance important? So for South Koreans, the cyberspace is a mythical. It has sort of mythical connotations according to some scholars. Uh, they compare it to Jeju-do's Yeo Island, where it's a land of innumerable possibilities, away from everything wrong that is happening in real world. Unlike Yeo, however, you can come back from that island, or rather that virtual area where everything just goes. So, the spread of cyberspace in South Korea and the need for cybersecurity becomes more important because it has become one of the major spaces where freedom of expression is executed by South Korean civil society. It was born out of the gaming PC bump culture, where gaming rooms were used to organize protests and organize discussions, rhetorics, everything under the sun. So for the people, it is important. For the South Korean economy, this is important because a large part of the ICT service sector, the ICT service sector is around 88.3 trillion won, which is around 15% of South Korean GDP, and around more than 77% people, around 78% people are using the internet banking services, and on which 14.5 million transactions were happening each day. Uh, and digital e-commerce in 2021 was at 168.5 billion US dollars domestically and 4.5 billion dollars in cross border commerce. So it is very important. And in this context, the government has also recognized the value of cyberspace. So they have been pushing the envelope. We'll see later how, but they have been pushing the envelope to basically develop cyberspace technology, make sure internet speeds are high enough to be globally competitive. At the same time, as Barry Wazan and Hansen calls it, that they have used it as a toolkit for authoritarian practices. So somewhere there's that push and pull between government using the cyberspace for governance and to better their own countries. Economy and society and political aspects, as well as for their authoritarian purposes themselves. It was seen in 2008, for example, the Candle March, which was organized within through online presence, was curbed down by government actively by telling the ISPs to completely remove any mention of anything that was considered dangerous. We'll also see how military is an obvious one because you have a lot of cyber attacks happening. Somewhere cyberspace becomes very important to the military for national defense as well, which we'll see later. So the we'll see this evolution of cybersecurity governance in terms of five different overheads. One is 1980s to 1994, which is establishing the internet in South Korea, where this cybersecurity was not on the picture at all. Um, then we start from the first phase where the dialogue of cybersecurity begins. The second phase where it starts sort of coming together. Third phase where it starts streamlining, and fourth phase, which is ongoing, wherein we see cybersecurity strategy actually becoming a cohesive one. 15-minute conversation. Right? Okay, so now early years we see, so South Korea was a bit later than its Western counterparts in establishing internet within its domain. US had done it in 1960s through ARPANET, etc. US, UK, and all these other countries. South Korea developed its own system development network, which is SDN, first network of computers, which was in 1982, and then they went international by connecting to Norway's MacVax, HP Labs in US, but more notably the multilateral computer network which they had, which US had established, called Computer Science Network, or CSNet. They were assigned first IP address .kr by ITU in 1986, which means that now they have enough infrastructure to actually connect domestically and internationally without too much of an issue. So this is an important milestone. In 1989, they connected to Pacific Communications Network and HANANet, which was basically a project between University of Hawaii and South Korea. So a lot of this internet has been a work through institutions, basically universities, but government had also started pushing the envelope. They started with plans to create integrated database for administrative information. There were plans for it in 1984 and then in 1992 again, where the basic computer network coordination projects in these 2 years were established. Then there were other acts which you can see: 1983 Framework Act on Telecommunications, and the most important of these acts, which you can see on the screen, is Act on Promotion of Information and Communications Network Utilization and Information Protection, which was basically called the Network Act, established in 1992. This was the first time where personal information for consumers was given legal status in terms of protection. But till this point, till this moment, we do not see cybersecurity being the main issue. It is that the documentation which is housed on network should be protected and not the network itself. So we do not really call this cybersecurity, but it is important to understand it in context. The first phase starts with 1994. So because in 1994 availability of internet it becomes starts becoming widespread. It gets commercialized and open to public, and around 1980s North Korea had also started establishing its own cyber capabilities. 1986 Miriam College was established in Pyongyang with the purpose of creating cyber warriors, and this also meant that these cyber warriors were with the purpose of developing cyber warfare in offensive sense. In the Korean People's Army, 1986 had also started establishing 1996, sorry, cyber warfare units. So somewhere there is a sense that there is a threat emerging, as well as proliferation of internet is happening. So 1995 we see the establishing of KISCOM, which is Korea Internet Safety Commission, and Hacker Investigation Squad, which is now Cyber Terror Response Center. One major so basically these bodies were supposed to monitor the content that was going on, and maybe remove the content that was deemed unsafe or illegal. uh, so these were happening, and then in 1996 Korea Information Security Center, which eventually became the Korea Internet Security Agency, agency here also, and now also Korea Internet Security Agency, which runs as now. This was established under the Network Act in order to, how should I say, systematically conduct work of data protection. Again, not cyber security as such, but data protection. But it did consider protection against hacking, cyber threats as such. So not in a very holistic sense, but still there was some consideration that cyber attacks may happen. Um, so in 2000, early 2000s, there was also the development of seed encryption technology, which is which is a national triumph rather for South Korea, because at the time, since online banking had become so prominent, I think around 80% of the traffic was going on online banking at that time. Um, there was a need for encryption technology, but the only one available in market was a 4-bit encryption technology supplied by US, which, to be perfectly honest, was a joke, because even a 1990s computer could crack it within hours, if not minutes. So there was a need for something which was obviously not available in market. So South Koreans developed their own 128-bit encryption technology, which they call SEED, which was only very recently defaced from their uh, computers. Um, Now, in 1997, with coming of Asia financial crisis, there was the realization that manufacturing could no longer be the base for economic development. So there was an understanding that something more cohesive, something more long term had to be thought of, and knowledge based technologies, particularly digitization and cyberspace, became one of the areas where South Korea started heavily investing in order to have economic growth happen for themselves. So, and somewhere this had also led to an amendment to the Network Act, which we had talked about. And we say amendment, but it was a complete overhaul. It broadened definitions of digital security, protection of personal data. It also gave the Korean Information Security Agency, which was first just established per the provisions of Network Act, it gave a statutory status to KISA. So somewhere it also became a very strong uh, organization in order to do protection of information security and secure the distribution of information, provide encryption and digital certifications for cybersecurity to the companies, etc. So it, and one major thing that was a shift around is that service providers were no longer guarantors of cybersecurity. So the role was also assigned to Ministry of Information and Communication to create guidelines for network security. Now, in 2003, North Korea had launched cyber attacks against the South Korean government and critical infrastructure, primarily for espionage purposes, but slightly also for disruptions. These attacks, one of these attacks was an internet disruption on January 25th, 2003, which, and understanding that the threat is actually rising, the National Cybersecurity Center, or NCSC, which I did not mention under what, but under the National Intelligence Services, it was established to be a control tower against all cyber threats, particularly those focusing on critical national infrastructure. It also gave way for creation of Korean CERT, which is one of their bodies to prevent cybersecurity threats, and UIT 839, which is a Youth Secure Korea strategy in 2006, which basically is, I'll just show you the basically these were the four tenets on which you secured Korea was established, that there would be better services, more secure and stable infrastructure, security would be embedded within growth engines, basically with all the organizations, businesses which were actually working for this, they should also have certain amount of security guaranteed to them, and a culture of cyber security to be inculcated. Let me just go back to this. So this was one. Some other attempts were also made, like Cyber 21 Vision and eKorea Vision, which and both of them had an important component in cybersecurity, but cyberspace rather, not security. But cyberspace was more important in eKorea Vision because the whole these two strategy documents were supposed to establish South Korea as a veritable internet powerhouse, but eKorea Vision had provided this as more strong, uh, they had provided this as a goal more strongly. Now, these were various legislations which were done prior to this, prior to the first phase, and during the first phase, in order to, which had something to do with cyberspace and cybersecurity. But the one that I have double starred, these are the ones which had digital security a little more strongly worded than the others. I can provide this later on, but let's see. So, second phase. So second phase starts with January 2000 cyber attack on Auction Co, which is again a financial organization, and then July 2009 DDoS attacks on major governmental and financial organization websites. eBay Korea used to own Auction Co, and allegedly by China-based some China-based hackers had attacked the servers of this company. The company was sued by 140,000 company was sued 140,000 times for data leakage of over 18 million people, but Supreme Court did not rule in favor of the appellants, but they ruled in favor of eBay Korea and SK Infosec, which was the information security provider, giving the reason that firstly there was no law that made it compulsory for companies to have firewalls and encryption technologies for sensitive numbers. And secondly, they also said that the technology level which could be afforded by Auction Co to protect their servers was not exactly could not match the technology used by the hackers. So somewhere it completely absolved them of any guilt. uh, Now, the 2009 DDoS attacks were also important in terms that they were attacking some of the governmental websites. But it is also important for us now, looking back, because it was one of Lazarus, which is North Korean APTs. It was one of their first known runs. So this led to this was also happening during E. Myung-bak government administration, wherein there was major focus on creating a compact government. I think the motto was somewhere around the foundation of micro government and micro macro market ideals to revive the economy. So basically, streamlining a lot of government's bodies. So we see a merging of some of these major gov- cybersecurity and cyberspace related bodies such as Korean Information Security Agency, National Internet Development Agency, and Korean IT International Cooperation Agency into one single Korea Internet and Security Agency, KISA, which runs till today. We also start seeing the first visible documents of cyber, which sort of deal with cybersecurity, which is the National Cyber Crisis Comprehensive Countermeasures. But this is fairly limited. This is still only focusing with DDoS, and this is still focused on North Korea. So it is not a comprehensive. It is not comprehensive in any way except just dealing with what is already happening. There were also beginning of efforts in terms of legislations to have a comprehensive cybersecurity act, but it does not really go through because of I think the cyber crisis management bill did not go through because of lapse in government at that time. The Ministry of National Defense also starts establishing the role of cybersecurity for national defense. So, Ministry of National Defense is set up an Army Cyber Command to formulate and execute tasks necessary for cyber warfare, such as planning, implementation, R&D, personnel training. Now, this is important because this time they start taking cyberspace as an avenue to launch psychological warfare against North Korea, which included posting on North Korean social networking sites, and while at the same time blocking South Korea's own social networking sites and servers from North Korea. Now, on 4th March 2011, another major DDoS attack happens. It is called 3.4 DDoS attacks, or more commonly 10 days of rain, because the botnet malware that was used in these attacks would basically self-destruct in 10 days. And when that happened, forensics had no way of actually ascertaining what went wrong, what was going on, and they would just keep spreading. So this led to a huge paralysis in the national banking server. They had also attacked other organizations such as and multiple government organizations, private organization website, and also U.S. forces in Korea, U.S. forces Korea servers. But the main effect was felt in the banking sector, particularly big banks like Nokia Bank. So they start with this another master plan. They create another layout, National Cybersecurity Master Plan in 2011, which again was not a comprehensive strategy, but it basically sort of underlined, underscored, redefined every single body that was responsible for certain aspect of cybersecurity. Uh, so for example, National Intelligence Services role was clarified vis-a-vis other agencies in South Korean cybersecurity governance. And there were some provisions to boost the national cyber defense by granting additional powers to security apparatus, such as National Intelligence Service, Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Internal Affairs, Home Affairs. Um, Basically, all of this was happening. This is the time when we see the beginning of cyber attacks sort of ratcheting up. At the same time, we are seeing a bit of streamlining of responses happening. We start seeing creation of countermeasures and um, body and plans in order to prevent cybersecurity threats, but we are still not seeing that comprehensiveness where the consideration goes beyond, say, certain kinds of cyber attacks or certain entities in cyber attacks. um, so now the third phase is actually where we see some change in how the cyber attacks are being perceived in South Korea, or rather, South Korea is becoming victim to. In March, on March 20th, and then in June, the March 20th cyber attacks were different. They, they were on government sites, and they were clearly, and they had leaked data of major uh, government officials at the time. But the attack to the presidential office was not earlier attributed to North Korea, which is very different, strange given what we have heard. North Korea attacks South Korea in cybersecurity. No, but the initial attribution was done to hacktivists, and it was only because there was this the malware signature or the malware coding was similar to what North Korea had used before, that it could be ascertained through forensics that North Korea might have been responsible. And this was not a single attack and then just go back sort of situation. This was a long held, long done cyber espionage operation by the malware Darkser, which we now know as Darkser. Um, Another thing is that so that is March, and then June had an attack on Sony, which was also sort of different, because this was the first time that, because the Sony data leak caused US to start sanctioning North Korea. In fact, North Korea has a dubious honor of being the first country to be sanctioned for cyber attacking. So this was the first time, because of the Sony attack in June 2013, that US sort of starts putting focus on North Korea due to their cyber attacks. So now we see, after 2009, the second iteration, which is 2013, of National Cyber Crisis Comprehensive Countermeasures, which again sort of look at DDoS attacks. It looks at North Korea, but it doesn't really look at anything else. There were some changes, like the presidential office became control tower for all cybersecurity efforts. And there was a chief of future strategy responsible for day-to-day activities, and national security office for crisis events. So basically redefining all these roles again, but the focus came from national intelligence service to presidential, into the presidential office itself. But the, this did not actually, even though this was was a matter of urgency, these steps were not taken till much later. And by much later, I mean about a year later, in 2014, after the Korean hydro and nuclear power co-limited attack had happened. So there was this there's this realization now that there's a lag in how these policies are generally adopted. Beyond this, we see integration of cyber warfare function across the military of land, sea, and air. And there was a defense paper which recognized cyber attacks as one of the major transnational and non-military threats to the country. So somewhere military is also becoming proactive in these in terms of cybersecurity. In 2000, so as we mentioned before, there were again attempts at creating a unified cybersecurity laws in 2013, 2016, and 2017. In 2016, Sai-Nuri party tried to bring in a law, and in 2017, Park Geun-hye government tried to bring in another law, which was focusing on cybersecurity. The 2013 law was mainly for cyber terrorism, but none of these legal attempts actually bore any fruit. They all became a dead letter. Which is very interesting, because cybersecurity has a bipartisan support. No party, no entity in South Korea says that cybersecurity is not important, but who gets what role and how much of a role, that is where it sort of just starts falling apart. NIS in particular, Park Geun-hye's attempt in 2017 gave immeasurable powers to NIS, that is National Intelligence Service, but there was this sense that NIS is becoming too powerful, and There was, as I mentioned before, there was a candlelight march in 2008 where government had used cyberspace to, push down the protests. That was done through NIS. NIS was used as the government tool often in order to curb any sort of protest or any sort of dissent. So there was a sense that, okay, this is not wanted at all. So there was always something or the other that caused the national cybersecurity law to not happen. So from here we also, as I mentioned before, there's a change in nature of attacks. Firstly, it was just barely there that okay, US is sanctioning people, or that the North Korean actors are refining their techniques. But then 2017 we see an attack on crypto exchanges, and then we also see ransomware attacks. So somewhere the cyber attack in South Korea had also changed the motive to becoming sort of financially driven, and we will see later, and politically driven. So 2017 cyber attack due to THAAD by China, where China had hacked a lot of government offices, and then in 2018 Russia had hacked systems associated with Winter Olympics. So this, while this was happening, oh sorry, I think I didn't change the slide. Yeah, so this is happening here. The fourth phase begins from 2019, and it is ongoing. So this, as we mentioned before, is somewhere because the policies were there was a change in how cyber attacks were happening. There was a change in motives, which we saw financial from military disturbances and espionage to prolonged espionage and financial. Somewhere this whole change was happening. Also, the actors were changing. It was not just North Korea anymore. It was also China, Russia, and from hacktivists, other malicious non-state actors. So somewhere this change in diversity rather than scope continued, and it was assumed that UN Security. It was assumed by UN Security Panel, or estimated by UN Security Panel, that $2 billion of losses had happened till 2019 from cyber attacks alone. Much of this was North Korea, obviously, and one of the reasons that is specified is that North Korea needed more money because of the sanctions, as cryptocurrencies basically, it is not controlled by the international financial system, so they can easily get money out of it. But we also see China there are a lot of allegations that China is engaging in patent theft, and there were also other hacktivists or politics-based hacking that was going on. And then obviously there were also international hacks that were happening with WannaCry, Petya, and NotPetya. So somewhere it was realized that focusing on North Korea and focusing on just DDoS attacks is not going to cut it. So in 2018, it was a 2018 document published in 2019 by Ministry of Defense Task Report, where we first see that there's a change in outlook. Because it called for diversifying its foreign policy beyond focus on one country, and then recognize the dangers of transnational and non-military threats, particularly cybersecurity. So there was an underlying need for a cybersecurity policy that dealt with omnidirectional threats. And from omnidirectional, they also mean it to happen in cyberspace. So they asked for more unification and streamlining of cybersecurity apparatus within the military, such as asking for a joint chief of staff to head a cybersecurity operation execution system, establishing wartime and peacetime strategies against cyber attacks, and more importantly, ask for offensive cyber attack strategies and training personnel to become sort of white hackers within the country. So they did not mention North Korea, which was a huge departure from their previous outlooks. Beyond this, one of the major changes that had happened was in 2019, the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which I will just let me put this forth. So basically, this was a document that was another watershed moment for cybersecurity governance. It was the first comprehensive outline for cybersecurity in country. The vision of the document was to establish a free and safe cyberspace to support national security, promote economic prosperity, and contribute to international peace. Now, they had criticized the previous approaches, but also sort of expanded upon that the threat actors can be different, the nature of threats can be different. So this, however, this was just a strategy. In order to fulfill this, they also created a basic plan just a couple of months later, which underlined I think 100 different policy and technological tasks to complete this. If you can see the 6 strategic tasks vertical, so for each of these tasks, for all of these tasks rather, there were 100 different tasks that had to be fulfilled, which provided a basis for national cybersecurity strategy to be more effective. Right. Beyond that, there are obviously pitfalls to that, which I'll just very briefly go through later. But beyond that, we have in 2020, when COVID-19 attack happened, DDoS attacks in 2020 were like amounting to more than 200. And one of the major attacks was against the Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering company, wherein plans and data regarding a nuclear submersible, nuclear submarine, sorry, were actually stolen. So somewhere it was felt that now we do need a safe space to happen in the phase of this crisis. So the Korea New Deal, which was supposed to keep the economic engine going, had been established. So Korea New Deal had multiple purview. One of them was Digital New Deal. Under Digital New Deal, one aspect covered this cybersecurity in its purview, which was integration of DNA technology, which is data, network, and AI-based technology. This was further continued in 2022 when the post-pandemic reality seemed closer. So another New Deal 2.0 was struck, which again sort of deepened that whole dialogue about cybersecurity within DNA technology. But they had also started asking for 5G and AI technologies to be established in government framework in order to protect it from cybersecurity. So somewhere we also see cybersecurity tools being enhanced. Yet in 2021, we see KAIRI, which is the Atomic Energy Research Institution in South Korea, that being attacked through VPN piggybacking sort of technology by Kimsuki, which again sort of underlined that there are certain problems within the Korean structure. There were other changes, other things that were brought in through Yoon Suk Yeol government administration. So, for example, digital strategy of Korea, which lists cybersecurity as one of the 6 major innovative digital technologies which need to be invested in, and defense white paper will come to later. ROK and a national strategic technology nurture plan, which again sought to create a new policy direction. And this one was to make South Korea tech hegemon, and somewhere it also underscored the need for security capabilities by mentioning it as one of the 12 national strategic goals to achieve for that particular goal of making South Korea tech hegemon. These developments, however, had their own pitfalls. For example, the national cybersecurity strategy had basic plan, had these very grandstanding aims, but no legal basis to support them, legal institutional basis to support them in many different aspects. So There was also an issue of continuity. So, for example, in 2022, South Korea came out with a defense white paper wherein they completely ignored the developments that were made before. They completely ignored national cybersecurity strategy and basic plan. They had made no mention of it, and instead they said we are going to make a new basic plan. Uh, the self-reliance aspect was also sort of somewhere put aside because the only way they were talking about national cybersecurity is in terms of US-based cooperation, which is displayed through NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence that South Korea joined in 2022, and third was that. North Korea again became the enemy number one. Like the one major difference that they had made that North Korea was considered to be sidelined.
Meghna,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but can you finish it within
Yes,
5
very
minutes?
quickly. Okay, good. So somewhere this was also happening that North Korea had become the enemy number one. Since we are in a hurry, I am just not going to cover a lot of this. Mainly, I'll focus on so current governance structure is basically that there's in legal terms there's no national cybersecurity law. There's a constellation of laws and directives that function with differentiated responsibilities, which we can see somewhere here. Multiple sectors have multiple laws, not a single cybersecurity law. Uh, Mostly it is managed by policy directives, which also apparently does not have a political continuity. So there's that. In sense of administration, president is generally at the helm. NSO, which is National Security Office, and I forgot to mention NIS, which is major one as well. And there's a secretary to president for cybersecurity, secretary to president for emerging and critical technologies and cybersecurity, which was announced in 2021 but has not yet materialized as far as I know. There are a lot of secretaries which are established for the purpose of making sure that the work is done seamlessly. There's a nodal agency, but generally it does not really materialize because there's sort of like a distrust even within the ministry as much as there is between the ministry and the public and the civil society and the business sector, because of the previous history that the government has of suppressing using cyberspace and using cybersecurity as a way to suppress dissent. So ministries is also one major area where Ministry of Science and Information Technology, National Defense, and Interior and Safety also manage most of the cybersecurity stuff, but it is also sort of spread across other ministries as well. There's a lack of private public partnership, which I mentioned, because there's a very small private participation in critical infrastructure, which actually has a more nuanced cybersecurity approach. So but it is not going, and government and private partnership does not happen beyond that, like only for specific cyber threats, but the institutional level cooperation is not there. I think I have made these points mostly, but basically, cybersecurity in South Korea is a balancing act. So basically, role of organizations versus the trust over them. Is NIS trustworthy given the history, or is it not? NIS was recently defanged, and then they were given powers again. So it's a push and pull. I didn't mention it in my slides, but it was there. Internet proliferation over vulnerability. So basically, the more internet is there in the country, the more they are vulnerable to threats. Asymmetrical threat perception is there. So now, are you going to look at cybersecurity from your geopolitical lens, which is where you have a singular country as your major threat, or as a globalized threat because there are other actors which are also gunning for your servers? Is one thing that they have to keep balancing on. Changing dimension of threat, which we mentioned in terms of changing scope, and changing nature of attacks, and then self-reliance versus managing the role of US within their system. So South Korea is notable in terms that they had understood the need to secure their networks and servers very early on compared if you look in terms of timeline. But this is marked by a lack of cohesive vision. There are multiple fragmented laws, policies, and institutions are not a singular one. There's a trust deficit, there are power struggles, and there's a huge tunnel vision towards DPRK as the enemy. We do see some diversification, but it is a two-step forward, one-step back sort of situation, given that 2022 defense white paper that we have seen. So 2019's national cybersecurity strategy was a welcome change, but it was marred by intrinsic issues such as lack of legal institution framework and external threats such as completely there was even though policy documents had said that okay, North Korea is not our sole enemy, or rather implied it never said that, but implication was there in the more political dialogue, speeches, etc. North Korea was still the enemy, so somewhere that complete breakaway did not happen. So it did dampen the effect that it could have had in terms of national cybersecurity strategies, comprehensiveness. So yeah, basically two steps forward, one step back. You focus on North Korea when you even as there's a multiplicity in threat actors and the kind of attacks that you are going to face. You are trying to again focus on US based cybersecurity strategy or US led cybersecurity strategy when you are also looking at your own self reliance for your servers, for the protection of your servers. Somewhere this also sort of causes DPRK to act more aggressively because if DPRK knows that no matter what they do or they do not do, they are going to get blamed. They have no actual reason to not go for something, not go for attack. So it's also sort of SARS the relationship further. And obviously, there's a discontinuity. Previous governments, if they try to bring in a new law or if they try to bring in a new strategy, it may not be followed through by the next one. So there are certain challenges, there are certain positives as well, early recognition and such, but it is what it is. We are still in that evolution period of cybersecurity. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Meghna, for the
Yes.
wonderful definition. It was really informative in many ways. So, I have one question.
Yeah.
That is, in this, you have mentioned that global affairs have impacted cybersecurity space strategies. But what about the domestic issues? Like we can see that the Molka case is increasing in Korea, South Korea. Like especially the entertainment industry has been affected by this incident a lot, and it has impacted the um, soft power of the country as well, like its outlook. So, what is your opinion about this? Does it have any effect on the policy making?
Okay, so I'm not really aware of this particular incident that you are talking about, but as I mentioned before, cybersecurity does get affected through domestic incidences, domestic policies as well. I mentioned that in case of government, sort of streamlining the efforts, uh, and also the emergence of hacktivists, for example. So somewhere you need to understand that that is what I mean. That threat perception is no longer limited to North Korea, and South Korea needs to be cognizant of that. And in those terms, the national cybersecurity strategy was a great step. That they did not focus on just one enemy, unlike the previous comprehensive countermeasures and master plans, etc., whatever all those documents that they had brought about. But here is the deal that even as this thing is happening, even as the cybersecurity strategy is evolving, the first knee-jerk reaction to any cyber attack that South Korea has is North Korea did it. So this whodunit game continues. And there is a recognition that obviously they aren't just one actor, they are internal actors as well. and obviously having it spread across different ministries also somewhere means that they also recognize that the threat perception is not just coming from one angle, it's coming from multiple angles. Somewhere, however, this fragmentation is also not great. And somewhere, this recognition, knee jerk reaction towards North Korea is also not great. It exists, however. It's a common enemy, it's a vote bank politics, whatever you want to call it. It is present and it's a problem. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Any other questions?
Okay, so two key findings of this paper. First major finding was that the evolution of cybersecurity strategy in South Korea has not been a linear project. It has its ups and downs, it has its pitfalls, basically in form of how they are recognizing their threat actors and what kind of responses they have towards it. For example, are they having focused responses to a multivariate threat, or are they having comprehensive response towards a much more diverse set of uh, this second of cyber threats. Second, and I think the major issue that I found, and it became my major finding for this one, is that there is a huge amount of fragmentation within South Korean cybersecurity strategy and a lot of distrust that is responsible for it. Uh, the South Korean government has a history of authoritative practices, right? So this also gets reflected in power tussle, which is not just within the government or within public and private. It is also intra-government. It is also within the government, where different ministries say, "Okay, I am more responsible for cybersecurity. No, I am more responsible for cybersecurity." It leads to a lot of fragmentation, which also does not lead to a lot of a better cohesive response. So not only do you not have a policy directive that is cohesive, but also you do not have a system that is cohesive. So somewhere these two layers of the problem is something that I found to be the key finding, I guess, of this issue within cybersecurity. Okay, so AI has, much like every other, I think it's Katheria Akarsh. AI has both roles in terms of both positives and negatives in terms of cybersecurity. Challenges, okay, so we know that it is being integrated for cybersecurity. I mentioned that. Challenges is that the other entities are also doing the same. So there was a paper I read recently wherein some particular actors, one of them is North Korea, is also integrating AI with for multivariate attacks, the cyber attacks, and it is easier because people are able to, the typical restrictions of people having to develop the coding, etc., that is not a problem anymore, or rather the coding having that particular modus operandi, that not being anymore. One of the biggest things that hackers need is anonymity and being able to be untraceable. That is a very important aspect, which is why that 10-day of rain was a very problematic issue. Now, if you're coding, if you're reusing your coding, if you're not changing it as often, you tend to get traced. AI will probably counter that entire problem, because they can develop new coding according to what is fed into them, what directives that are fed into them. They can exploit zero defects, zero day zero day vulnerabilities more easily, because obviously they do not have those restrictions. So these are two possible challenges that I can foresee. There are obviously multiple more, and it is still under research, but there's that. Okay.
Should I read it?
Yeah, no, I'm reading it. So, digital laundry in South Korea. Okay, so I again am not really aware of this as a whole problem. I do know that certain ISPs and certain companies are responsible for removing certain kinds of inappropriate content. Uh, does that come under cybersecurity? If you look from a subtle angle and squint, I would say, because on one hand they are also tasked. A lot of these ISPs are also tasked with removing propaganda content from the network spaces in South Korea. On the other, they are also used to stamp down on dissent, which I have mentioned before. So, will I call it cybersecurity? Again, it's a debatable thing, and some actions of theirs can be done, but I don't think everything is that black and white for these bodies. I hope that does cover the question.
Yes, I think there is no more questions. No questions. So thank you so much for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, Apurva wanted to ask. To us. You can go on, Apurva.
South Korea has also effectively managed the COVID-19 with the help of its cybersecurity and tracing the people, like what we did in India. Can you please link the both models if you
Okay.
can?
Cybersecurity, in terms of cybersecurity or in terms of the modeling, the use of
General
AI and
term. Though it was an issue of cybersecurity as well, but we overweighed our protection and preventing COVID over cybersecurity those times, and people willingly let it go.
okay, so yes, that did happen. In fact, South Korean model of tracing of tracing and providing vaccinations and everything, that was actually hailed during COVID times. But it is post COVID that we have started to realize that we actually gave up a lot more than we bargained for. Let me see. So. One of the aspects why cybersecurity became important at that time was, again, a lot of data, which was, it wasn't just people's data that became important, but also the data which was in stored for the financial institutions during COVID-19. A lot of these crypto exchanges and banking and financial organizations were actually targeted by attacks, by cyber attacks, as well as many institutions and many hospitals and medical colleges, which were, and pharmaceutical research centers, which were doing data on patent and vaccination, which were doing experimentation on that for those patent data was also stolen. So on one hand, cybersecurity became important in this context, that you have a huge mine of data sitting there, which is there for multiple purposes. On the other, we do now know that, again, it's also a issue of trust towards the government, which is very much lacking within the people. We know now, especially, it was also during this time that the National Intelligence Service also gained innumerable powers. They were defanged somewhere around 2019, 2020. Their powers were limited to basically being a research and development sort of, to do research and development and monitoring sort of work. But somewhere the PIPA was, I think, amended to make sure that NIS had unlimited reach for data. And there was no way to prevent that. So somewhere we are realizing, in South Korea, there's a realization that yes, we gave up a lot more than we asked for, and the government is going back to its old ways, where NIS, their arm for dissent suppression, is getting a lot more data. On the other hand, it was also important because from the external side, there were attacks happening, 200 DDoS attacks during 1 year in COVID-19 time. Somewhere, that balancing act still exists, lack of trust versus, and this is true in India as well. that when we gave up our data, we got our vaccine cards linked with Aadhaar. There was this talk that okay, this is giving up too much of our data. Now they have control over our biologies, also our vaccination, our medical histories as well. There, it's always a balancing act. The trust needs to be established, and South Korea so far has not.
Yeah, so Priyanka has asked one question. Like you mentioned, South Korea did not mention North Korea sometimes behind cyber attacks. What was the reasons behind it?
Okay, so it's not that South Korea did not mention North Korea in cyber attacks, but rather they did not mention North Korea as a enemy in some of their policies, notably the two major documents that came out in 2019. The reason for this is again um, we earlier attacks on South Korea did originate from North Korea, and there was a threat perception coming from North Korea because they established a whole college for cyber warriors and the Korea and cyber warfare units in Korean People's Army, just in order to be to basically be able to attack uh, cyber spaces, and it was sort of implied that it would be for South Korea mostly. Obviously, there are other countries as well now. Even North Korea has not limited itself to South Korea. It has spread across various other countries as well. US is obviously one, but there are others. But so somewhere, however, since 2013-14ish, we see that the number of attacks that are happening are no longer just limited to North Korea. They are happening internally, as I mentioned, and as Arya mentioned as well, that internal attacks are also happening. Hacktivists are there. There are other countries, most notably China, Russia, Iran, and all these others, which are also sort of throwing their dukes into the fight for dominance in cyber attack as cyber attack threats. So it was important for South Korea to not just have a cybersecurity strategy in place, but also have a cybersecurity strategy in place which did not limit itself to one country. So if you focus yourself on one country, you sort of ignore all the other threats that are emerging, and that is not right. Which is why it is considered a major step back when in 2022 they said North Korea is our enemy, which is North Korea is the enemy. Which, okay, maybe around 70-80% of the attacks are coming from North Korea. Definitely that is true, but it is not the end of their cyber threats. It's also coming from other sources. So somewhere you have to take that into cognizance while you are forming your cybersecurity strategy, which was that was the main reason behind it. Also, one more thing was that okay, so this is more political, but the administration at that time was a little dovish towards North Korea. So they did not want. They were trying to make overtures towards better relations with North Korea, and yeah, that did not really work out. But the attempt was made in order. This attempt was made in order to make sure that you do not anger DPRK more or antagonize rather DPRK more, because as I mentioned again that if you keep on saying DPRK is the problem, you sort of take away the chance for DPRK to say, okay, that we weren't wrong. Because DPRK knows that if any time something happens in South Korea, they are going to get blamed. So, what is their incentive? Where is the deterrent for them to say, no, we were not responsible? They are going to just throw their hands and say, okay, we are going to attack you. We are going to get blamed anyway. So, what's the point? So, there's that. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Any more questions? Okay, so I think this is the end of the discussion. Thank you once again, Meghna, and everyone else.
All right, KRC, thank you for having me.